What's happening, guys? Thanks for tuning into this next segment of the Sunday Scaries portion of the podcast. In today's episode, we spoke with Jim Brenlinger. He works over at Strike. He also took Pump's crypto course. He was a member of cohort 6. I'm pretty sure. Don't get mad at me, Jim, if I got that wrong. But we had a fantastic conversation, had a lot of great insights with Sean and I. Moist, unfortunately, today was absent, but that's all right. The kids learning a lot, so we'll give him a break there. But we did go over quite a few things. Predominantly, we really talked about just the generational differences in government and how it kind of relates into who understands and to what level do they understand the impact of Bitcoin, not just on the economy, but just like at a personal level, and like how like certain decision types are made. There's a lot of parallels between high time preferences with fiat and low time preferences with Bitcoin. So all in all, great conversation. I'm not going to drag on too long. So here you go, guys. It stays in. We'll like maybe bleep out some stuff, but it's kind of like similar to like, yeah, similar to like Rogan. You know, we don't want people to think like we're a bunch of like non-genuine people that are trying to do something super cut up. I
can switch to my good mic too.
Yeah, let me know when you're ready to rock.
Is that a better mic?
Oh,
Jesus fucking Christ.
Sorry,
Just sitting here
mic.
fucking with me this whole time.
I might have to leave this in. Honestly, that's hilarious.
Go ahead.
Is this a better mic? Please don't have the fucking screen.
I got jokes.
Jim's whipping out all the surprises.
I got
today.
jokes.
Yeah, you do.
Everyone should know, if you've started watching at this point, there's been 20 minutes of Jim's tiny mic this whole time.
Yes.
Yeah, this one.
Sean, literally, I haven't seen Sean whip out the headphones in like weeks. And I think he was like, oh crap, I can't hear Jim.
I use this mic on Discord a lot because it's just easier to having this like in your face.
I'm gonna blow my fucking eardrums on it. So.
All right, let's get this fucking puppy rolling. So, all right, Sean, I'm gonna let you rock and roll with the. Am I breaking up already? What the fuck?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, so you just.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and start with that first one. So if you want to pull up, are you wanting to like screen share these articles as we go through them?
Yeah, I'll screen share them as we go through them. So obviously today. Paraguay. Yeah, today's the week of September 18th, 2021. Current Bitcoin price 48,000. Still crab walking for the last 3 months, feels like. But maybe next week things will change. I don't know. I got a good feeling.
All right, so pull up that Paraguayan article there. You got it. Yeah. So this is really interesting. Yesterday, Congressman Carlitos, I'm going to butcher this, Carlitos Rejala shared on Twitter his plans for presidency.
Rejala.
So he shared his plans. Basically, he wants to make Bitcoin tender, and he introduced a bill. But if you scroll down a little bit, I think it's in the second paragraph. Is it there? Maybe the third one. So he introduced a bill, and instead of making Bitcoin currency, it defined it as property. So clearly, like Paraguayan politicians and obviously politicians across the world, right? A lot of people are getting behind the idea of Bitcoin, of hyper-Bitcoinization, all those sorts of things, but it seems like people are still struggling to understand what it means. So we have people that are in positions in different nation states, or that are going to try to be in these different positions in different nation states, that are trying to get Bitcoin recognized as legal tender. But what's the concern, right? Like whenever they're trying to define it as property as opposed to currency, or any other form of asset or whatever. Is there a problem with politicians rushing to kind of be first to market, for their country, and not quite understanding what it is with the legislation that they've already put out? I
think so, because I think Carlitos, if I'm not mistaken, it looks like he changed his Twitter profile picture, but I think this is the same guy who like introduced a bill a month and a half ago. And in that bill, it was literally just like, all cryptocurrencies are going to be legal tender, like obviously he didn't understand like how easy it was to like create just like crypto, you know, which would mean that literally like it doesn't solve the problem at all. Like anyone could just, it'd be worse. And like anybody who like knows how to like operate Binance could just like start creating like multiple different coins and just like purchase whatever anywhere. So yeah, I think great points that I mean, it's definitely a race. You don't want to be last.
What are they like so scared of though? Right? Like the only thing is good, and the only thing they do is deter innovators, right?
Well, it depends. So like in this one, this particular guy who might wind up running for president or you know, whatever their fucking political titles are, he has made it clear that he wanted to make Bitcoin legal tender, but like as Alan was saying, that there was a previous bill that just kind of broadly addressed it as crypto as a generality. So it's, I don't know. Like, I don't know where the fear comes from for adoption. I mean, some of them, you know, they're beholden to, you know, particular contractors or particular big businesses that just want things to stay the way they are. And whenever your entire constituency or your entire political campaign gets funded from these people, you're more than likely to parrot their ideals.
Yeah, it's like, I was going to finish a thought on about like the only thing, just think of how many, if they mark it as property, tax it, or create any regulation, think of how many innovators they're stifling. Like even just like up and coming engineers who are like people who are flexible and are ready to like create small businesses. Think of how many they're like pushing away that would have done it. And think of like, what if they just like Jack Mallers recently, like in the Bitcoin conference was like, in El Salvador, I don't need a license to do it. You can just, and if we just completely, just think like if we completely deregulated it, how much like we shouldn't be afraid of that innovation is my point. Like it's going to just be.
Oh, 100%.
It'll increase the value of the dollar. It'll increase the value of, you know, international currencies, the Turkish lira, things like that.
Further down in this article, if you want to scroll down a little bit, Alan, I don't know which maybe it wasn't in this article, but if they like, it was also introduced that they want to do Bitcoin mining licenses for Paraguay. So like you wouldn't be able to mine like as a company without a license. And I forget where I saw that. I think it was in this article. Let me pull it up.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at Carlos here. And like, I can't see, there's not a whole lot on him when you Google him off the get-go, but this is the guy I was thinking about. So yeah, he did back in January introduce a bill to Congress that got shot down super fast. And I think a large reason for that, from what I've been told, he's in a party that would be like equivalent to being in the Libertarian Party here in the States. So like his like clout pull meter is like incredibly low. You know, it'd be like Gary Johnson trying to like institute a Bitcoin bill into Congress. Like it would get shot down so fast. So obviously it seems like I get worried when I see stuff from guys like him. Like obviously it's good to have any kind of Bitcoin law instituted or at least talked about. But like it makes you think like, okay, like what is this guy's motive? Is he using this just as like a method to gain popularity and become president? I don't know how Paraguayan politics necessarily works. I'm assuming it's a democracy, just solely based off of how tied our economy or their economy is to ours.
Yeah, I think part of the problems that people are going to run into with politicians is assume the politician perspective, right? There's really only two places the politicians can exist right now whenever it comes to Bitcoin. You've already been a politician for quite a while. You already have your constituency. You already have the people that support your campaigns. You already have all your entire basis that's behind you that's made you successful, and none of that includes Bitcoin. So why would it? Unless the majority of your constituency supports it, which just isn't the case, because we have what, like 2 to 4% adoption worldwide right now, like very small. So
still early.
It's still early. Yeah, if that should definitely be what people hear there. But point being, your base already exists. Like there's no reason for those people to change. So that's one side of it. The other side is you're a kind of on the ground politician, you're probably younger, you're creating a name, and you start seeing, and maybe this is a good transition for you, Alan, into your Gen Z article. You start seeing a lot of these transitions where people are starting to understand emergent technology. They're starting to understand the failures of our financial system, and that there are exits out of that. And those are the people that are going to adopt it. Like this guy, Carlitos, I don't remember how old he is, but he's trying to
38, 37. 38. Yeah. So he's a millennial, which was a point I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, though, I was going to make that point too, that, like Bukele's decision to make Bitcoin legal tender, from an age perspective is so huge because A, he's the first millennial head of state in the world. And B, like, it's not too big of a coincidence that a millennial would make such legislation. So the fact that another one, which kind of ties into the Gen Z article that we'll talk about here in a little bit, the fact that another millennial is like, hey, like, I get Bitcoin. I mean, the guy obviously understands tech. Like, I feel like the biggest holdback for a lot of these countries is that there's just, and especially the US, I mean, this is fucking evident. You can't argue it, that like, I think the average age in Congress is like 71.
Yeah.
72.
It's a gerontocracy.
Yeah. So like,
it is.
Fucking Jim sitting over there silent for 10 minutes and he comes in with the bang.
But yeah, no, it is unfortunately, like, it's like you got grandma and grandpa running the country, and fuck, they probably have jitterbugs. They don't have smartphones, or some, they're like looking out at it like this one, like, I can't see. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of factors. One, like, El Salvador obviously made a lot of sense because they were a dollarized nation and they had left I think it's called the colon back in the 90s. I think that was the last time they had like their own currency, and they decided to go fully on the dollar. So the fact that they already they didn't really have like a central bank to be in control of like monetary policy, aside from like borrowing and lending from the IMF and the US. It was kind of like a no-brainer. It's like, hey, we already don't have control over our own dollar. Like, you guys kind of stuck, and 75% of our population's unbanked. Like, Bitcoin kind of solves a lot of the problems that we're having, and when you hear Bukele talk about just how like he wants to instill hope and like excitement for the future in like the young generation, and like in order to do that, he has to create opportunity. And then he furthers that by saying like, you can't create opportunity without establishing wealth. Like, regardless of whatever agenda he might have, like, he's a smart dude. He understands the long play rather than the short play.
So with the low time preference that's typically associated with Bitcoiners, does the generational wealth that Bitcoin offers require generational change?
I was actually thinking about this question a lot, and I was actually worried about this question. And I almost brought it up in one of the discussion group, but I did post the question. I don't think I worded it correctly. And what it was is that so Bitcoin is generating generational wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my worry is that would make Bitcoin less inclusive. However, when is there a system when there is not generational wealth created? And it goes down to like, I don't know if you guys watch like Brett Weinstein, Jordan Peterson, like other like economists, but like it's almost a human nature aspect. Like and they talk a lot about like building, not just building lineage, but building mutual reciprocity to your community.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, but that's like, I literally, so I was on don't make fun of me. I was on LinkedIn this morning. And like I saw like a post by Bitcoin.
Did you hear that Bitcoin Inc? Yeah, Alan's on.
Yeah.
He's on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. But so there's an article we're gonna talk about later today about how Bitcoin fixes the money and saves the world. And in that article, they like kind of touched, but I know we're skipping ahead here a little bit. But obviously the whole like Bitcoiners are very much so that like war loves fiat and money printing, and it needs it in order to operate. And someone made a comment saying like, no, like wars are started over religion. And it's like,
very complex, more complex.
It's very complex, but I'm like at the root of the problem. Like if you need to build war machines and tanks, you need money and you need the ability to print money in order to get the manufacturing to do so.
Well, hold on there. Take a step back. What's religion?
Religion is ideals and thoughts.
It's just an organized system of belief.
Right.
But I mean, there's two sides to that coin too, and that's a really packed. That would take a lot of unpacking. But I think one good aspect is that it's a double-edged sword when we talk about no limits to budget, because maybe a collective consensus on like a goal is needed, as far as like when I think about that specifically, I think about NASA. So NASA was only able to get us to the moon because of like no overhead limit. And maybe when they realize that they can use Bitcoin as a tool, like a million, infinity over 21 million, maybe we'll be able to accomplish really even bigger feats of human engineering.
I believe so, definitely. And like backtracking to your point about how I think you're saying that like how like if like people adopting early on like Bitcoin, like they're going to be so much more wealthier than everybody else, and it might be a little bit of like exclusivity rather than inclusivity. I think there's going to be a very small amount of people that are in early, and I think those people right now, anybody right now who's in is kind of in that, and then knows like what they're holding and like don't sell for like the next 10, 15, 20 years. But I think that's like the risk reward kind of aspect to it right now, you know, because it's not like it is a very sound, strong form of money, but we're not at the money stage yet, if that makes sense. More of a store of value. And so there is a risk reward aspect where the people who are early on into the said investment, like there should be able to reap, because they took on all the risk, you know, like they took on all the risk, they took on all the education, they took on spreading the word, they took on building the infrastructure. So yeah, they should be paid out. But the catch is that wealth, it's going to be distributed out pretty quickly and pretty fast, solely on the fact that when we hit, what is it, 2147 or 2148, like all the Bitcoin that'll ever be mined is going to be mined, and then no new Bitcoin is going to come into play. So that's going to do one of two things. One, like you can't just game the system over and over again with like real estate and either investing in real estate or like stock markets or stuff like that like are inflation prone, which is how like the super wealthy like dodge all this inflation, is they just throw their money in these investable assets and then they reap the rewards because they're the biggest whale in the room. They take from everybody else at the bottom. The other thing, I'm totally losing my train of thought here. Decision making, because like your money is appreciating in value rather than depreciating in value. Like the decisions you make and the things you buy are going to be considered heavily and so much harder than like it is with money. Because right now in the current system, like your dollar, especially today, where like your dollars, like the official number of depreciation is what, 6%, 6.5%. And we know it's way higher than that. When that's the case, like, yeah, you're going to get rid of your money as fast as you can. You're not going to hold on to it at all. Versus with like Bitcoin, because it's deflationary and we know like the supply, like the programmatic supply and demand schedule of Bitcoin, like people are going to think twice about buying that sweet car or buying that sweet house and think more about like, hey, like maybe we should like invest money more in like our schools or hospitals or like any kind of infrastructure for that matter, because that'll last longer than like some of these like wants that like fiat just incentivizes so heavily today. I don't know. Sorry, I went on a rant.
What's the value of a Bitcoin the last week before the last Bitcoin is mined?
Dude, we're not even gonna be on dollars at that point. Like, so
when you describe that
like that demand.
It's crazy. Like when you describe that time period, I just think of like this Blade Runner-esque world
Right.
Like
Yeah.
altered carbon Blade Runner-esque world. But like
we better
I would
have
hope-
an altered carbon world, because if I'm not there, I'm gonna be pissed.
Yeah. And I would hope that we still instill, like you said, the value in our schools and the value in our, and there's not like a social divide. But I would assume, it's not going to be, or I would hope that it's not going to be a huge social divide, like similar to our push and pull, like of our government. We don't, one like plus side of the fact that legislation takes a long time to push through is the fact that we have this inner struggle, so that we don't create, a huge, we don't overstep our bounds on something, and create like an unintended negative consequence of like some dystopian world. But I would assume that like Bitcoin will be used to transact, and who knows in that time period if there's going to be like some new OpenSea, some new commodity. Like in my opinion, I think it's clear that we're moving towards like a commerce of experiential commerce, like commerce that's based on experiences, as opposed to like young people who don't value like owning Bentleys. Like if you think about Lord's song Royals, it's like her song Royals is about like, we don't care about Maybachs anymore. We just care about like our friends and like each other. And like maybe there's like Bitcoin will be very valuable, but wealth will be created with people like transacting their skill sets, what they create in the world for Bitcoin.
Right. So you're talking about like a creator experiential economy that.
Yeah. I'm trying not to reference Ready Player One, but Ready Player One.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, okay.
Bitcoin Ready Player One.
Yeah.
So here's some food for thought, and I hope I can find this tweet here. But you guys have seen like those drawings of like futurism back, I think it was like the 20s and the 30s when that stuff was like super big. But like
like Sid Mead. Yeah, I know. It's funny that you say that, because look on my walls. That's all I got.
That's so cool.
It's Sid Mead drawings. SYDMEAD. He passed away in the last year. He inspired Blade Runner and Star Wars and Star Trek a lot.
That's really cool.
But yeah, so like I hope I can find this tweet. But anyways, like these worlds these guys were thinking of back in like the 20s and like 30s were like so like elaborate and crazy, where they were like multiple level, like incredible skyscrapers, and like you had like highways that were like running up in the sky, and you had like flying buildings, and like looked like beautiful, looked incredible. And then what happened in the 70s is like we got off the gold standard and everything became just so morbid. I don't know if like the two should directly correlate hand in hand. Oh, here, I found it. Sweet. I was like, I better fucking find this shit. Let me share it here. Dead air. I hate it when I do that. I'm sorry. You guys can see the photo?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, like, look at this shit, like you have like your trains running through down here, and then you have like another level of like trains running through like the very top of these skyscrapers, and they're running through buildings, and you have like all these awesome planes like flying around, and it just looks like a society that was like very thoughtfully planned out, and like the structures are like these like stone well-built structures that are going to last centuries. And that like hope and like imagination and everything for the future is just gone.
Was this pre or post Great Depression?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know when this was drawn up. But if I had to guess, this was probably based off of the airplanes.
Yeah.
This is like roaring 20s. This isn't like 30s. Like, oh, we're in a depression. But then, okay, so like let's say like after the 30s, like look at all the war ads that were out during like World War I and World War II.
Yeah, I wonder if there's just something there that's like you have the Roaring 20s going, and let's just assume that this is from the Roaring 20s, because I mean there was a lot of futurism kind of drawings from the 20s anyway. So even if this particular one isn't that, like there was a ton. Maybe there's something to be said for like a stable economy, a stable money, a stable people, much less divided than we are now. We've like never been more divided than we are now. People actually like identify by their division at this point.
Fucking weird.
It is weird. It is very,
very weird.
So like whenever you have that sort of solidarity and that sort of stability in your economy and in your society, maybe there's just a hope that kind of inspires within people that says, all right, what is the best possible thing that we can imagine for what we can currently output into the world? Yeah. And like, I feel like that's what futurism kind of represented for people, is like, what's the best possible thing we can do for society and how do we make it beautiful? And that's what happened. And then, I've
got cool food for thought on that one.
Yeah.
During those time periods when like technology is meeting like an arc point, like a vertex point, there's this it's on Wikipedia, it's called simultaneous discovery. So like during these, and it does happen during times of war too, like the invention of the computer, simultaneous discovery. So like the computer itself was invented like it was being iterated on in different locations, just because like the technology was getting to a point where like we are starting to think about what's the best thing we can do. And so like the ENIAC, the Colossus computer, Alan Turing, like they were all iterating on the computer like in separate locations, like not knowing each other. And There's a few other good references on this. There's two more references.
The light bulb was like that too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like I think there's two other references that come to mind for me is there's fallacies and like computer chips that become hardware security risks are actually discovered by different people separately. Like they're just working on it. And then also, like, I guess the Lightning Network itself is kind of like a simultaneous discovery thing in Bitcoin, where we're iterating on layer 2. I mean,
right. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because it's got me thinking like I know the history, like the pre-Bitcoin stuff with just like the cypherpunks, like pretty extensively, and just like some of the attempts that there were at creating like a digital currency. But I wonder if like at some point some more light's going to be shed on like other potential Bitcoin other projects that could have been Bitcoin. And when I think about it, I don't really think they're out there.
I'm sure maybe there's like something on someone's desktop where they like maybe they got to like before 2009 they were thinking of and started creating a project. Maybe it could have split. Who knows the different timelines that could have occurred.
Yeah, I mean it's possible, but there's just something about Satoshi's white paper that's just so I just at how short and how simple of, like, when you look at that, you read that white paper in comparison to some of like these shit coins that are out there. Like some of these shit coins have like just like all these like mathematical problems, and like they're like 100 pages long, and then you have like Satoshi's white paper that you could literally
how many people, I know this is a huge cliche topic, but
yeah,
like how many people do you think were involved? Like, do you think Hal Finney? And I think it could have been like up to a dozen more. Like how many?
I firmly believe that Satoshi, I know a lot of people like to say that he could have been a collective group of people. I think he's one person. I think he was one person only.
Do you think he's Hal Finney?
Yeah, Hal Finney would have been a very clever person, because if you go back and you read the like their I can't think of the word, the messaging board that they were on, like you can distinctly tell like they were two different people based on the way they were writing and reading stuff. But like I don't know. I mean, like the guy was obviously a genius, so he very well could have thought like all this out. But I think they're both dead, honestly.
You do.
Hal, I mean, well, I obviously Hal's dead for sure. I mean, we know that for a fact. I think Satoshi's also dead. I mean, or he's just like an incredibly disciplined person. Like the amount of like Bitcoin that he has like in that wallet, like it would take like a tremendous amount of discipline, unless he willingly knew from the get-go that he had to destroy the keys.
Do you think it's possible that a black swan event could occur where he cashes it out.
It is. I mean, like statistically speaking, like, yes, it's possible. Do I think it's probable? No, I don't think it is. I don't know. I mean, dude, there's like even like, so I hate going down this rabbit hole because it's like it's a ton of speculation.
I was
love
like,
it at the same time.
Veering away from it. I was veering away from it, but
I gotta say this. So we all know like the internet originally like was like created like through like the US government. And in order to like make spying and stuff like capable, like they had to give it out to the public through like public domain. The same thing with like Tor browser and everything, like all that stuff like started like in-house government, and then it was released to the public, and then the public like refined it, made it better, made it a usable product that everybody could use. And in doing so, it masks the government's identity of going in and like snooping around, you know, because they know there's going to be other bad actors that are like civilians trying to do the same thing. So be the US, you get off the gold standard. 90s roll around, .com bubble crash happens. We enter the war on terror. You know, there's some smart people there in the Department of Treasury that are like, hey, like this game we're playing of make believe money is not going to last forever. I don't think it'd be that far fetched to say that, hey, the government like created the protocol, threw it out there. And they've been stacking alongside just quietly, and they're just like, because obviously, like, think about if the US were to come out and like put out this thing called Bitcoin, like nobody would buy into it knowing that the government was in control. I mean, just look at how CBDCs are treated today. So the only way that like the US could like, and I know this is like super conspiracy theory, but like I don't think it's that far-fetched not to like consider this, that the only way for the US to maintain its power and dominance as like a global power financially and through wealth would be to create an asset like this that they willingly give up control to, but are able to keep a majority of the supply.
Right.
Sorry, rant over.
Yeah.
You guys can say I'm fucking crazy.
No. I mean, it crosses our minds, right? And I guess my own thoughts on it. Like we learned in our course, you know, that the encryption itself, the SHA hash, was something that the NSA iterated on.
Right.
So I mean, but I think that I understand I have a really good point here. I understand that the US government is like, they may have played a role in it very heavy-handedly, maybe, who knows? But I think and often it is the case, you know, when you look at the Olympics, or you look at like, even if you think about like basketball tournaments, you think about debate tournaments, you think about like the host nation, like home court advantage, like you get to kind of play by your rules kind of a bit, but at the same time you understand like what the ins and outs earlier than everyone. So that doesn't mean, I think my clear distinction that I think a good point I would want to make is that even if it was the US government, our government's made up of people of all nationalities, and whoever was working on this was probably a very diverse background. So, and I think it's clear, like, it may have started here, but Bitcoin's for everyone, you know, it's not like, so even if we confirm that conspiracy is true one day, like, I think it's important that like Bitcoin is the world's cryptocurrency, you know?
Well, it would solidify the idea of like true capitalism, you know, in the sense that like a free and open market and a company that's making the best decisions for its customers is always going to win out, you know? So like,
yeah, and whether that company's in India, the United States, Japan.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But it could be, I mean, even if it was the US, you know, like hopefully someone in government there is realizing like, hey, we can't play this short game forever. And somebody back in 08 realized like, hey, like we got to give up like monetary control, but like we're going to be super wealthy, at least for the short, or at least for a decent amount of time. And then like we can start making like more better decisions and not just nuking civilians in Kabul like we just did.
Yeah, if anything, I think if it was done, maybe it was done by like a handful of individuals, and you know, the government's never good at doing anything, so So maybe some people should, maybe they just took it upon themselves. Maybe they were affiliated with the government, took it upon themselves,
Well, I will say, and I think we should wrap it.
It's like it's turning into like
But last point I do want to make is that like a majority of the government's definitely inept. But there's also like a section portion of the government that's very good at getting things done and getting what they need to get done finished. Because we wouldn't be, let's be honest, we wouldn't be number one in the world. I mean, you can debate that right now, but America wouldn't have gotten where they were if everyone was a complete moron. I think there's some level that government maintains where they want you to think that they don't know anything or don't know how to get anything done. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too hard into it.
Before we switch off of it, I've been hearing a lot of people in Twitter spaces and clubhouse rooms say that in a way the government is decentralized because they don't talk to each other and they have no fucking clue what's going on. So if the government did have some sort of heavy hand behind it, 95% of the government doesn't fucking
know. My God, who knows? Yeah. But yeah, so okay, obviously some more of the story. Government's inept. They're all old. And some of these new world leaders, like in Panama and El Salvador, these millennials are kind of picking up the torch on Bitcoin. But and we were talking about this earlier, they were like, I think Jim, you brought up this question was like, is it going to take a full generation to kind of get like people like onboarded onto Bitcoin? And to me, I've never really thought about that question, but just here, like thinking about it over like the last 10, 15 minutes, I think so. I think it might, honestly, like, there's this article here. Let me pull it up. Titled Why Generation Z Loves Bitcoin, and it's written by a Zoomer. So I do kind of want to go through and read this because I think it's very interesting to get the perspective of somebody that's grown up with nothing but they lived through a recession. They probably, most of them don't really remember it a whole lot. I know more people our age kind of vividly remember that very well. But they live in this world where we're totally virtual, totally like everything's like gamified. And so like the idea of digital money, especially with how big like gaming is with these Zoomers, it just makes like a lot of sense. So I'm really curious to see. And this kid's name, the kid who wrote this article, his name's Lawson and Enright.
I just want to point out that this guy's article is like written in a voice that comes 100% from his generation.
Yeah. 100%. No, that's what I was saying is like, I want to read it because like, I want to personally, as like a millennial, understand like what these Zoomers are saying about Bitcoin and what are their views and how like they're talking, which is weird. I hate saying that like there's like a younger generation out there that's starting to enter the workforce.
It's a very weird thing. It's also eerily like you hear a lot of the sentiments that our generation has echoed, and like you don't think about it, but obviously like 30% of the money supply being printed over 18 months, like at a certain point we have to admit that we're no longer the ones holding the heaviest weight.
Right. Well, and it's interesting to think about these guys because like I think people put a lot of hate on millennials. I think rightfully so to a degree. But like on the Zoomers, like, there's some complaints about them. But like when I listen to teachers talk about them, I listen to like parents talk about them, like there seems to be a lot of hope around this generation, regardless of like what you think about like them being so like consumed in like creator economy stuff and all of that. There's definitely a level of creativity there that's like interesting to see. So we'll go ahead and go through this article here that Lawson wrote. But he starts off, he says like, I am a Zoomer. You may have heard of us, self-entitled, spoiled, and good at tech. I recently graduated from high school. Wild. Attended university and entered the workforce. Fucking wild. These guys are starting to like, 10 years, they're going to be making big, heavy decisions. If you've done any of these things in your life, then there's a good chance that you're a human and this article is relevant to you. Although this writing is tailored to younger demographics, it still applies to everyone. I'll begin bluntly. You are operating your life at a loss. Surprise. Now let me explain. Time is money and money is time, literally. Every day that you go to work, you trade your time and energy for yet to be redeemed credits of other people's time and energy. This technological innovation is called money. So obviously just these first few sentences, like this guy understands like the problem with our current monetary system. And yeah, he understands what money is, which a lot of people I don't think very much often realize like their most valuable asset isn't their money, but it's their time. And then they don't equate with like how their time should be represented by money. Like your money shouldn't devalue over time because the older you get, shouldn't you be more like valuable?
Right.
By
That's
default.
where a lot of the older like pension style companies came from. Like you make more money. There's not a ridiculous level of inflation making your money less worthless. So it made sense to stay at a company for 25 fucking years.
Well, and that those pension funds were like heavily rooted in gold and stuff. I mean, like they knew, like everybody knew gold was going to increase in value year in and year out. And like I think the like steady supply increase of like 2%, like it was like hard known. Obviously with like the rise of like tons of technological stuff in the last days, it's been easier to extract gold out of the earth, which doesn't discount its fact of being like a form of hard money, because it still very much is, just that Bitcoin's better. But yeah, so anyway, so obviously Lawson kind of gets it here. He continues on. He says like, so as a Zoomer, I have many daily purchases and some life goals. I buy a coffee most mornings. Stop doing that. And one day I was like to own a house. Don't do that either. At least not in this market. No fucking way. I also have a savings account full of yet to be redeemed credits. Dude, throw that all into Bitcoin. If I should choose not to redeem, parentheses, spend these credits immediately, then they continuously lose value. With every second that goes by, the morning coffees and that future house get more expensive. As a result, I'm able to ask less and less of other people's time. Why is that? These items get more expensive because governments use expansive monetary policies like low interest rates and money printing. I have no control over these expansionary monetary policies, nor do I benefit from them. A cup of coffee, if I were alive in 1970, might only have cost me 25 cents. Today, it cost me upwards of $5. Dude, no, it doesn't. Stop going to Starbucks. Go to fucking your grocery store and get a can of Folgers and you're good.
Right.
Like, you're so concerned about your time. How much time are you wasting going to the fucking Starbucks? And two, you'd be saving way more money just making a cup of coffee. And it's way better, honestly, way better. Starbucks is overrated fucking crap. I don't know if you go to Starbucks, Lawson, but I'm assuming so if you're paying $5 for coffee. If we continue along the government's targeted rate of inflation, that cup of coffee may end up costing me more than $10 before I even retire. It's an uphill battle. Now, I don't know if he's actually like buying coffee. I think it might be more of a euphemism just to kind of show where inflation is going. But it for the average person buying coffee every day makes a lot of sense. He continues on. I have to run faster and faster just to stand still, and so do you. The current financial system is designed around growth at all costs. The economy is dependent upon debt-fueled consumption for consumption's sake. Consider the impacts of this on the environment. If the incentive is too quickly to spend the money you earn today before it loses value, then resources are being dug up and mined before they would otherwise need to be. The live for today mentality comes at the expense of a better tomorrow. By today's measurements of growth or gross domestic product, a cyclist ruins the economy because they do not buy cars, gasoline, insurance, or have car crashes. However, a fast food outlet is great for the economy because it creates cardiologists and sick people who demand medicine and treatment. You know, I've never, right before reading that, like I've never really thought of that, but like it's fucking true.
Right.
Well, you look too, like you look at, I don't know if you guys have gone into the What the Fuck Happened in 1971 website.
Yep.
And like the craziest chart for me is the one where you see like specialty jobs and like how like low steady that like it's increased over time. And then you have like the bullshit like service jobs that have just like skyrocketed through the roof. Crazy stuff. If somebody can like pull that chart up too at some point, that'd be cool. Someone can find it. And as Lawson continues on here, here's the real kicker. The debt that has been generated is what we're about to inherit. We are on track to pay for all of the existing debt from past generations. Tax rates will be hiked, cheaper credit will be enforced, and dollars will be helicoptered into our financial system. Whether through taxes or inflation, we will trade our time to pay for someone else's mistakes. Unless, of course, we hold Bitcoin. A boomer told me once that he had solved the world's debt crisis and explained that future generations would just pay for today's consumption. I politely explained back that I store my wealth in an unconfiscatable asset so that I can't be forced to pay for your government's egregious misallocation of resources. I ask this question to you, the reader. Do you? Yes. Money is possibly the most important human construct after mathematics and language. For millennia, societies have employed either a token-based monetary system like gold or seashells, or a ledger-based system like the fiat currencies of today. Throughout human history, the technology used for money has slowly and continuously evolved. A fixed money supply means that human beings are more intently vet their spending decisions, act less wastefully, and focus more on what's important for the future. If your time and energy are stored in a non-confiscatable, non-inflatable asset, then you cannot be forced to pay for previous generations' decisions. How does that sound? What do you guys think? What do you guys think of that?
Like, I do have a thought on that. I had a history teacher that was really awesome. Shout out to Mr. Bacon. And he was
Mr.
also my
Bacon,
social.
like,
Yeah.
like
Yep,
the,
like the bacon. Yep.
sound like
And
a
he
dope
was-
guy already.
yeah, he was really nice. And he was also my social studies teacher. And he had I remember specifically, I think back what resonated was he talked about like in New York City, for instance, like when New York is like has a good economy and they have a optimal allocation of resources, what happens? Like there is a increase in specialty of jobs. Like you have there's shops that are open 24/7. You have like and the specific reference he made was like you have a biker shop, then you have like a repair bike shop, then you have like a shop to repair, like they have all the parts for it, then you have like this other shop. You grow specialty when you have allocation. And I am looking for that chart now. So
Yeah, I was looking for that chart too. I can't find it.
it's like deep in there. It's like
I know it's like that's like 3/4 of the way down there.
Energy.
I'm pretty sure.
It won't let me control F the images.
But yeah,
no,
no,
like he's right. Like I mean, we were echoing the exact same sentiment. We still echo the exact same sentiment, which is being trapped in the chasm of debt that's been created by another generation, and that's that's where the question comes: does generational wealth require generational change?
I mean, I get wary when something like that is said, that you can't be forced to pay for previous generations' decisions. I think on Bitcoin, it's vastly reduced. I mean, tremendously reduced, like incredibly reduced. But considering how valuable Bitcoin is to become, and humans aren't perfect and innately driven by immediate desire, regardless of what society deems, whatever way society kind of shifts into like mode of thinking. I mean, like right now it's very like instant gratification. On Bitcoin, we speculate that it'll be more so methodical and like planned out type thinking. But humans are humans, and like say like your father gets a bunch of wealth passed down from your grandfather, and your father totally just decides to blow through all that money. That kind of screws you over. And like apply that to government and stuff. Like when you're dealing with such a valuable asset, and you like the decisions that you're making have so much weight on them, the severity of making a wrong choice, I think, is way more impactful than it would be on a fiat standard. Personally, I mean, we could debate that all we want, but that's just kind of like the first thought that comes to mind. You guys are still looking for that chart.
Yeah. Is that the one?
Let me see here. Let's see what we got.
Is that the one? It's like second to last. It's the second to the last one.
Yeah. Okay. So the chart we were talking about earlier, I have it up here. It's showing the growth of physicians and administrators from 1970 to 2009.
You're showing the Sid Mead images.
Shit. Am I showing this one now?
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
So
this chart shows the growth of physicians and administrators from 1970 to 2009. And on the left side, the chart goes from 0 to 500% to 1,000, all the way up to 3,500%. And on the bottom, obviously, we go 1970 to 2009. this chart is illustrated in percentage growth, and then it shows physicians in brown and administrators in yellow. The yellow, I'm telling you, is retarded in proportion to physicians. I mean, we're literally seeing from 1970, the growth is very low, very minimal. And then in 2009, the amount of administrators that have entered the workforce has surpassed 3,000%. You compare that to physicians, they haven't even grown. And it's kind of hard to tell here by scale, but what would you say? That's about 100% growth.
Yeah, it's a very low graph with
right.
What is that, 500%, and it's not even breaking 1/3.
Yeah, and it's not even close. And so and then you compare that to the percent growth in US healthcare spending per capita. So we've had 100% increase in the amount of physicians, which sounds great, but that's only literally a doubling from the 70s to 2009 versus the administrators that have grown 3,000%. Like, it's an insane increase. And then you look at the percent growth in US healthcare spending per capita, we've gone from 0% in 1970 all the way up to about 2,200%. So when you compare that to the amount of physicians, like our healthcare has increased tremendously, like exponentially tremendously. And I think a lot of that has to do with just like the decisions that like fiat kind of enables, I mean, like you're on the road, on the go all the time. Hey, like, I don't really want to stop and make myself a good meal. I have McDonald's or Taco Bell or like Subway right here, like, and it's cheap. So like, I'm just going to buy that. And that adds problems of like obesity and everything. And then you look at other things like partying, like drinking, tobacco, other drugs and stuff, like, like there's this like glamour to this lifestyle that people like with a lot of money have these crazy parties and they do these crazy drugs, and like that takes a toll on health too. And for those of you that aren't like super big Bitcoiners, you're like what the fuck does this have to do with like anything? And it all goes down to just like, what's your time preference in decision making? Like, are you a high time preference person where like you don't have like the tolerance to like be patient and wait out for longer term better gains? Are you a low time preference person where, hey, you're going to sacrifice things right now, things are going to suck for a little bit, but down the road that all that sacrifice is going to pay off tenfold?
Yeah.
And you can see, I mean, this is even like this chart even is just like a good representation of like how a majority of society thinks. Like, how long and how much money does it take to become a doctor?
A lot. I used
nine to 11 years,
and we would be refinancing student loans a lot, and
yeah,
they'd be coming out with a lot of debt after a long time.
Oh, for sure, and that's like a big risk reward, like, I mean, your time, and B, like the competitiveness is through the roof for one, and secondly, like if you fail out, like now you're stuck with a heaping amount of student debt. Good luck paying that off. Good luck. So because of like all that fear and stuff, like what are most people doing? They say, well, fuck it, I don't want to be a physician. I don't want to put in the extra time to get in my PhD. Like, I'm just going to go either graduate high school or just get my undergrad, and then I'm just going to enter the workforce and play it safe and not really contribute to like a STEM field. Just my 2 cents. But anyway, so let's get back to, I want to get back to this article here. And
I think it's important to, like, I'll try to keep this succinct, but like, you do hear that term. Like, I heard it ever since I was like, sophomore in high school, kick the can down the road. I think it's important to make a clear distinction too. Like, we don't have to define a whole generation. And I do hear every now and then you'll hear very optimistic tones as far as, Gen Z and millennials both being called the fix it generation. Like, we're here now. There's no kicking the can down the road. Every generation is now here to like make things better. And as far as that, like, Bitcoin and computer science is like like, I used to think it's cliche, but it is such a powerful tool. Like, you type something to a computer, and the computer, it does what you tell it to do. Like people who do computer science 101, they usually have like this epiphany moment where it's like, wow, I typed print screen and it showed up on like the screen. Like you can tell like robots what to do. Like we're like literally like we have superpowers. Like we could tell a computer what to do. And for that reason, like not like, and by all means, I'm very
I was just gonna say you're doing the thinking for the computer, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, and it's like, and I'm by any means like, and that also detracts from people who are apprehensive to tech. And by all means, I'm a very open-minded person. I understand like things have to be done analog too sometimes. Mm-hmm. But if we can get past that cliche, it's like what like a big philosophical thing I'll drop is like wise men, they plant trees for which the shade they will not be able to reap the benefits.
It's a great quote.
So that, yeah. And so like, but if we get into that mentality, not only are we steering away from like a hawkish kind of mindset, like me versus everyone, but we're steering into like such a like smooth society. And and when I say society, I'm not talking about like, you know, just the hard hitting, heavy packing terms like that I want to avoid with the S and the C terms, but like we're moving into like a very just a newer age way of doing things. Like younger people understand like a communication, and they understand like we're an international community and we can solve problems quicker, like now.
Yeah, rather than like all this like traditional like whatever banter or stuff, you know.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you bring that up. I think everybody that like took Pomp's course, I think you could technically classify him as like a type A person. A, because like there's a financial cost up front, and then there's also B, a desire to learn. And for some people, some people in the course I think are kind of fresh, but a lot of us have stories about like, hey, like we entered the space in X and X year. I think the most common one's 2017. But I think this kind of plays into just like the society we're in today. I know I don't know if we were talking about before the podcast or at the very beginning, but just how like society is just so divided. And I agree with you. Like there's these I agree with the fix it thing you're saying about like the millennial generation. I think there's a good chunk of us out there that are just like, we see all these problems and we're like, we gotta fucking fix. We can't just sit around and like not do anything about it. Like this stuff's getting worse, and especially in the last 2 years. And so I think there's a lot of us out there, but I think there's also a ton that like just want things handed to them. And I don't think you can deny it. I mean, you can see it in just like just this like I'm a victim. I'm me. This is your fault. I'm not accountable for any of the bad things that are going on in my life, you know. And obviously, like people are born into shitty situations. Like there's some people that are very lucky to have a silver spoon in their mouth, and there's some people who are very disfortunate that have like a broken family. And there's more of the broken family people than the silver spoon people, but overwhelmingly everybody in the middle outnumbers the other two categories.
Class.
Yes, tremendously. So
it's also like the materialistic things, as far as I think it's the mentality that can be conquered easily. Because one reference that I think about a lot that has been, I've heard mentioned in other podcasts is I think it was there's like the movie Wall Street, where the dude is making a phone call from his car and he has got like this huge Hulk phone that's like $5,000. Yeah, that's like the materialistic stuff that we crave is fleeting, but like like building your wealth is like something that can be learned by anybody. And it's like that $5,000 phone, now you can get a $300 $299 phone iPhone that is like worlds ahead of that thing.
You look at like Huawei and what they're making too. I know obviously you can't buy Huawei here in the States, but I hear they're pretty big down in like El Salvador. And it's no iPhone by any means, but like you can buy a smartphone for like $25.
Yeah.
Touch screen. It's got apps. You can text, you can call, you can access the internet. Like imagine paying $25 back in 2000 for something that could do that. Like you would literally be considered a witch and burned at the stake, similar to the same. They would bring back the Salem witch trials. Like they'd be like, "What the fuck is this?" Just 20 years ago.
Salvadorian witch trials.
Yeah, right.
No.
Okay, so let's wrap up this article here. So Bitcoin is a digital monetary network native only to the internet, has no physical form, and crucially, it has verifiably limited supply. Bitcoin is the first iteration in human history of a proprietary token-based system backed by a distributed ledger. Because of the fixed supply, your claim on society's time cannot be diluted. No arguing that. Bitcoin is one of the most risk asymmetric trades anyone, especially a Zoomer, can make. It has limited downside, and yet it has an infinite upside. There is a non-0% chance that Bitcoin will go to 1 million in a lifetime, but there is a 0% chance that you and my dollar savings will maintain value over the next 10 years. With Bitcoin in my pocket, I run with the wind at my back and I swim with the current. Special thanks to at BTC, Shelling PT, at Nick Camp Mine, and at Room BTC and Dell for helping edit this piece. So yeah, I mean, he obviously, the kid's been through high school, he's graduated out of college, and he's got a job, so like he understands the value of money. I think that's something that's really hard to translate to a high schooler, where like they don't have rent, they don't have a car payment, they don't got insurance, they don't have to pay gas. It's not really until like you actually hit like the real world that you really start to understand like the severity of like taking on loans and a mortgage, and credit card debt and all of that, which is why personally I'm a big advocate. I think kids out of high school really should go to work first and take on some financial responsibility. And then if they deem like, hey, like I want to actually go learn more, there's a little bit more accountability there rather than just like mom and dad helping them get some loads off the bat, and it makes them like when I dropped out of college, like I was literally working with chemicals and pesticides for like a year or two out in like 100-degree heat for months on end. And then like the flip side on that, and I live in the Midwest, so we get like 100, 105, 110-degree heat, and we also get the blistering cold, so like summer times I'd be dealing with like pesticides. I'd be like long pants, long sleeve shirt, like I'd have like chemical gloves and big boots on because like chemicals are super corrosive, and it'd be like 100 degrees outside, and I'd work from the crack of dawn at 6 a.m. all the way to like 10 o'clock at night, and just over and over and over again. Like I was happy because I was like making my own money, but fuck, it was definitely not a way to live at all. And like when I had left, I was like, I really wish when I had went to college that I actually would have studied what I wanted to study rather than what my parents wanted me to study, and
right, for sure.
And so like I think like personally, like I'm like, man, if I had done this just backwards, like I'd worked first and then gone to school, like I would have been like so much more like but it's hard to say. I don't know. It's like hindsight's 2020, and like adversity is what like shapes and creates people too.
There's an infograph that I have been looking for everywhere, and it was an interactive infograph of different people jumping off a diving board. And it was some like the people who jump off a diving board and go straight to college. Then it was the people who jump off a diving board like after going to work. And ironically, it was like they're drill diving off, and then they go like the person that worked first goes higher up, just because like you're going into college with like you can already like pay off half your car. You can already like you have that foundation. And I heard it a dozen times, like people, they wish they had some type of finance 101 class in school. I don't know if you guys had one, but I didn't.
No, for sure not.
We had it as an elective, but it wasn't required.
We didn't have anything at the school I went to. And I think this kid is probably like, you know what? I think you can probably say, so the 7 stages of death. I think we can probably say that there's maybe not exactly the same, but we can say that there's like 7 stages of Bitcoin adoption. So like if you go through the stages, it'd be like shock and denial, right? That's whenever you realize that that you're fucked, that previous generations have made horrible decisions and the financial system's just garbage. There's pain and guilt because you're like, okay, this sucks. I don't really know what to do. And I feel bad because I don't know how to fix it. And then you go to anger and bargaining, where you get mad, you lash out, you blame the older generation, which is currently where this writer is currently at. then depression, and then there's the upward turn. Like depression is like, oh no, there's no fix, and then the upward turn is, oh, there's Bitcoin, and then reconstruction is where you start understanding Bitcoin and the Lightning Network and Strike and all these companies that are going out in El Salvador and all these other nation states that are considering adoption. You're like, okay, we're working through this, it's being adopted, and then the last stage being acceptance and hope, which is where I'd say all of us are, where it's like, oh no, this is how you fix it, this gives me hope. So in a way, you consider it like the 7 stages of Bitcoin adoption.
Yeah. Well, I'll add on to it. I think the first 4 stages come on all at once with Bitcoin.
For sure.
It's like it hits you like, what the fuck? And then like, yeah, the very end is like, I mean, shit. I remember back 2017, 2018 thinking like, man, I got no hope for the world until like literal. And I sound so cliche.
Then Bitcoin hit 23K.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then. Well, Bitcoin hit 23K and I was like, oh, look at my wealth in like dollars and stuff. And then like, once I really started reading into like, just like money, there's like, what is money in general? And like what money is a representation of, and like how far we've like veered from the gold standard, that like, holy crap, like we can get back on something like the gold standard and better. And like this, like would personally, I think it fixes like a majority of the problems in the world. Obviously there's some things that it doesn't fix, but like a lot of the big ones, like mass spending, mass manipulation of markets, war, infrastructure spending, generally like just corruption. Well, and the like dissolving of the family unit. Like I know, like I'm 25. I have a fiance, I have a child. Fiance and I, like, we're abnormal. We're not. I mean, I guess nowadays, this day and age, like being not married and having a kid is a little bit more common, but like 10 years ago, like that shit was still like frowned upon. But like fiance and I are special, unique situation where we've been together for 10 plus years, so it's not like we don't have a bad relationship. But I have plenty of friends that are like, yeah, I'm still like, I don't want to get married. I don't want kids. Like,
yep.
And it's no coincidence that like the debasement of their money, it directly correlates with like someone's ability to want to have children too. And in order to keep a nation alive, in order to keep a generation alive, in order to keep innovation alive, like you need to keep repopulating. It's the only way it's that shit's gonna work. Right. Yep. Which is scary to think about. But yeah, no,
Crystal and Sagar had a really good take on that too. You guys watch Crystal and Sagar? He talked about city life and the corrosion and like the fact that even in cities that were becoming less of a community.
Yeah, no, that, and I mean, it goes back to the graph you're talking about of like the diving board and like the kid who's going to work versus the kid who's going straight to college. I think college was a viable option back pre 1971, straight out of high school. And that's because at that time, like kids were working and you could go to school, work part-time, buy a car, afford gas. Like you could go to college and work part-time. Like my dad used to say this all the time. He was like, I went to college and I worked all the way through it and I paid everything off, books and all. And I'm like, yeah, because it was fucking possible. Like I'm still making the same wages you made back in 1970, except college is like 10,000% more. like you guys, like, don't fucking gaslight me with that bullshit, Dad.
Yes, no, that's exactly what it is. Everyone would always talk about how they were just able to work through school and afford everything. It's like, okay, well, did your part-time job pay like $60,000? Because that's what my debt is, and that doesn't allow me to like eat. That doesn't pay for my car. That doesn't do anything for me. I can't even buy fucking toilet paper. That just pays the debt, Dad.
Have you guys ever pulled up an inflation calculator?
Yeah, not in a little bit. The last time I did was I was calculating the Turkish inflation because I'm half Turkish. I lived there for a while. When I left YTL, Yeni Turkish lira, it was 1.8 to $1, and now it's like 8 to $1. It's really bad. And lo and behold, guess what's gaining in popularity?
Bitcoin.
I know little to nothing about anything going on in Turkey at any given time. I should do better on that.
Last I heard, they were going against some of the exchanges. I think there was one called BTC Turk. I'm not updated on the current going ons with if it's completely regulated or if it's still a gray area. So,
okay. So here's inflation in the last 30 years from 1990 to present. 100%. 100, like wow. Over, like, I am sorry. Like, that is not fucking normal. And like the world uses the US dollar as its base currency. Imagine like when you start going further and further down the ladder, Turkey, for example, you know, like their inflation's 10 times worse.
It's also been and not to interrupt you, because I want to shed Turkey in a really good light, because their economy has always been one of the fastest growing. They have the youngest demographics, and they are like on, you know, their GDP has always been one of the fastest growing developing countries. And like if you go there, like in various cities, have their economy has been growing exponentially, and it's only like in very recent, like past decade and a half has it been hyperinflation.
Is there a, and I'll let you get back to the inflation, Alan, is it for your resources that you use to follow anything going on for Turkey, is there anything specific, any specific websites that you typically go to just kind of keep up with the goings on there? Jim?
Well, I lived there for 10 years and I moved away in 2016, 2017. So I did have, and most people were not into Bitcoin. It's I know, because I don't know, the level of social media has been growing. Like for instance, like on various social media websites, it's very reassuring to me that I've been seeing more people become connected. So for instance, like on Twitch, Twitter, like I start to see a lot more Twitter, a lot more Turkish accounts, a lot more Russian accounts, a lot more, you know, Filipinos are coming online. Like the Philippines has YGG, which is the Yield Guild Games, which is like that huge development where they got a huge investor. So I keep tabs on it and I read the news through, there's a cool thing called TRT Turk. BTC Turk has a thing, but I don't want to get too much into the politics because it's like a really heavy subject. Sure. But one thing that I want to say is like it has one of the largest, youngest demographics of any nation in the country. So if it's currently not allowed, who knows what might happen in the future. So like, if there's no going ons, because I believe the current administration has outlawed Bitcoin, which killed a couple of the exchanges, I think. He's also been known to like completely shut off Twitter, like in the past. Like he has judges that will just shut off Twitter for like 2 weeks before an election. Like I was physically
doing that. Like
so I was physically in Turkey when he did that. And I was like, crazy. This is not something that is good to do.
So, okay, but here's what I've always wondered. I've never done a deep dive into it, but like what if you use like a VPN to access Twitter?
It's sad because, you know, not everyone is that tech savvy. Yeah. So they get fed the rhetoric.
Gotcha. Okay, so I want to see something here real quick.
Yeah.
not to
get so deep on that.
Not to get so deep. But so like, okay, so obviously 1971 is the year we got off the gold standard. 50 years later, fast forward to 2021, we've had 575.5% inflation. So if you earned $50,000 in 1971, in order to have the same purchasing power that you did in 1971, you would have to earn in 2021 $337,737.
Yikes.
Insane. So that's when we left the gold standard. So let's do this backwards. And I'm curious to see if we're going to still have this same number here. So let's go. We're going to do 1921.
Oh, no.
And then we're going to go 1971. So same 50
was like, difference. Oh, no.
Same 50-year difference. Same $50,000. So I'm not changing anything here, right? Aside from when we left the gold standard versus when we were on the gold standard. Wow. Same item. Cumulative rate of inflation in 50 years. It's way better, by exponentially better. you're at 126% versus what was it? 575. So in that time period, you would have had to, that $50,000 item in 1921 would cost you $113,000 in 1971. Like, if that doesn't tell you how broken our current financial system is.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What could have we have done to avoid that? Like, would we just stayed on gold, or like, because we know gold has its cons, but maybe it's just more of an intelligible discussion should have occurred.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't think that the proper conversations were had. I don't think that the consequences were understood. I think it was like born out of necessity at first, because like 1921, I think we go into, World War, and we can't afford it, right? So we have to be able to print money. So the obvious solution is, well, let's take it off gold, and then we'll give gold back to everybody at a later point, so that way we can come up with enough money to win this war, because we're going to virtue signal like fuck if you don't do it. So they do that thinking that they're just, out here being the world police saving everybody. And then it just continues to go. Like, fiat currency is a relatively new invention when you consider the time span of like just monetary societies working together. And the failure of them isn't quite understood until we fail. Like, we have to kind of be the test subject to show everyone why the fuck you don't go on fiat.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, things really kind of started in 1933 when FDR like confiscated like all the gold back into the reserves in order to fund the war effort. And this is where the conversation starts, right? So in order to bring us out of the Great Depression and then like eventually enter World War II, like the US literally needed to take wealth from the people in order to get them out of the horrible economic crisis they had created, right? So this is why not your keys, not your coins is such a big deal, right? So like originally, like being on a gold standard, what did that mean? Well, carrying around a gold bar and trying to divvy it up when trying to buy bread is fucking hard and you're not going to cut it up right away. So banks created this system where, hey, rather than lugging and having to keep safe all this gold, like we'll hold on to it, and then we're going to give you this paper note that's much more easier to trade, barter with, buy things with, et cetera, et cetera. And this note is representation of how much gold you have in the bank. So it made sense, it made sense to do it, but it was a first step in the wrong direction. So when FDR confiscated all the gold, obviously people couldn't redeem their dollars, but then they started redeeming bonds. And so this started opening up other ways for people to kind of like store their wealth. So you had like real estate, bonds, stocks, all of that. As time went on, what did America start doing? We started entering more wars, especially Vietnam. I mean, prior to that, we had Korean War. Vietnam, I think, was really the one. I mean, how long we were there? 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, like I think I heard on the podcast recently that's why Lincoln created taxes to begin with, to fund the Civil War, right? I think
exactly. Well, in order to fund military and fund innovation, you need to be able to have cash on hand. And so I think what the government kind of figured out was like, hey, like this gold standard is really kind of biting ourselves in the ass. Like if we position ourselves, and like we had just won World War II, right? Now we're in Vietnam and we're fighting communism. And we're positioned to be like the global superpower in the world. It's either going to be us or the USSR. And obviously, like the USSR was going to collapse. If you read Seyfedin's book and the Bitcoin standard, kind of dives into why like communism and socialism just cannot work from a monetary perspective. But I don't want to get into that conversation here today. But it doesn't work, so they collapse. And then like you have us in 1971 pre-USSR collapse trying to position ourselves to be like, hey, like let's, rather than everybody using gold, let's convince the world to get off gold and use the dollar, which is ingenious. And like if they don't take the dollar, we saw this happen throughout Latin America like extensively throughout the 70s and 80s by installing dictators and people of power, and knowing that A, they would use the dollar, and B, if they didn't, like we would give them guns, ammo, tanks, everything, just to be like, hey, like take all this military stuff and you got to use the dollars though. And then they would still say no. And then they would give them more dollars and be like, you're going to use the dollars, And it was this, from a short-term perspective, it was like, oh yeah, this makes sense, and then long-term, a lot of these countries suffered, El Salvador being one of them. But we're so far removed now from like trying to establish ourselves as like the world power, that we've really kind of shot ourselves in the foot, per se, that there's really like no one else. There's nothing really stopping anyone from like a China or European Union trying to establish themselves now as like the dominant trading currency. And the only way that we've been able to maintain like that kind of superiority is through war. I mean, what happened in the Gulf War? What happened over in the Middle East? What were we doing for the last 30 years? Well, I mean, in the Gulf War, you had a leader decide that, hey, actually, I don't want to sell my oil in dollars. I'm going to sell it in what I think is either his local currency or some like European currency. And we literally went and fucking bombed his whole entire country.
That's American idealism right there.
And that's not me like making anything up like at all. Like that's literally what fucking happened. And so when it's so blatant at that point, it's like we're really kind of fucked. Like there's this kind of civilization cannot last forever. And it's because like all these short-term decisions have like severe consequences, I mean, like the passing of debt on to future generations. And then like, because of that passing on debt, like you have less ability to like, buy a house, get higher educated. And because you have less ability to do that, and that's like what's needed to live and be a functioning member of society, like, well, what are you going to sacrifice? Well, I'm not going to have children, and then you're not having children. So like innovation starts to stifle in the country. And it's just like this snowball effect, like it's worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And what caused it? Unsound money.
I think there is a sunrise though. There is a sunrise with we're entering in post-industrial revolution, right? And what I mean by that is like India is getting out of their industrial revolution. We're out of ours. And we're understanding like the sun is going to rise, and we have an international community that is young and has aspirations. And the Bitcoin the Bitcoin ethos, I think aligns. I think it aligns with, that idealism that is not catering to war. It is catering to stability, to peace, to just unlimited economic growth across the board.
For sure.
Multiplanetary, to Mars, to the moon first, to Mars.
Are we gonna be able to get the Bitcoin network to the moon and to Mars?
I mean, of course. What else are they gonna use? Shitcoin number 2.
Well, so I used to say that this is something actually kind of when you start thinking about it, it's like, okay, like the entire reason why we have such small blocks on like the Bitcoin chain, the reason why it's limited to one megabyte is because we're literally limited by physics and the speed of light for the time it takes like that entire mega block to be transmitted like all the way around the world, like in 10 minutes. So if it were any bigger, like the ability for anybody to download the blockchain becomes exponentially harder, and B, the ability for anyone in the world to validate a transaction also becomes longer and very hard. So obviously, like the beauty of the blockchain is that it's a distributed ledger, and everyone on the network can view it and confirm transactions on the network. But if we go interplanetary, like we're not gonna be able to get Bitcoin on the moon initially. Like there's no way it's gonna be able to sync up with Earth's blockchain.
It can just be called like blockchain moon with asterisk. And then the nodes, you'll have the initial node goes out. Right. Then you have like you have a node here and there. Then like they'll have to be like some kind of taproot 5.0. And then they'll sync up. And then once you create a link to this ISS number 2 that's rotating around, that's orbiting the moon.
Yeah.
So in Mars, it'll link up to the ISS number 2 on the moon, and then it'll be like, boom, Starlink, SpaceX, yep, Bitcoin 2 synced.
Jim's
so it's just going to be 20 minutes, not 15.
So, okay. Cat's out of the bag.
No, I wish.
No, I honestly,
Moon partnership announced next week.
Yeah, no, somebody is definitely going to tackle that problem, and they're going to make a fuck ton of money figuring out how to do that. The only issue that I foresee with it is like, Bitcoin is such an organic thing in the way it started, if you exclude my government conspiracy portion earlier in this podcast. But that excluded, like, by definition, like, Bitcoin is very organic, like there's a whole lot of speculation the first few years, like there's really no value to it. Like you ran a node, it was like a hobby. I mean, that's just how it started with the early cypherpunks. And no government or any one individual entity really like had enough money, power, or incentive to kind of control the network in a dictatorial kind of way. But if something were brought like to the moon, like, I don't know, like, I mean, obviously, like, Earth processing power, like, if you were to able to sync the two initially off the get-go, it wouldn't be a problem. But I think it would be one of those things where, like, the moon might have to have like its own separate blockchain or something, in which case, like, well, who's funding like all these missions to the moon? Well, it's like privatized corporations, and we've seen how great they've handled the monetary system. So I don't know, I don't really want a company.
I'm generally curious, like, is that, I just don't know, is that in reference to SpaceX or in reference to what they're doing? I have no idea what that means.
It's no diss on like SpaceX or anything, but they're like a company at the end of the day. So like, rather than like having, and the problem with a lot of these big corporations is that they're built on the fiat system and fiat standards. So they need quarterly earnings. They need to show every quarter, like, hey, we're turning a profit. And so when that kind of decision making is like in play, like, obviously, like, competition is great in like an industry, and the person with the better product's going to win out. But the way like the fiat like system has it structured, is like you have these huge conglomerate corporations. There's not really a lot of competition, and there's a lot of pressure from stockholders to show that they're making a profit every quarter, not even every year, not even every 5 years, not even every decade. Like, they have to turn a profit every quarter. Like, that's insane. That's you're not going to make good long-term decisions in that kind of model. Like, it's just not going to happen. Now, no diss on like Elon excluded all the BS around the Bitcoin stuff, but like, obviously his companies are trying to do like a better good for the world. But at the end of the day, like, they're subjugated to the same monetary policies and problems that we currently have. So I don't know. Like, I would like to say they wouldn't be bad actors, but like, let's be honest, every company wants to make money.
Yeah, true.
Unless it's a Bitcoin company like Striker, Bitcoin Inc., or something of the sorts,
Have you seen the Starlink revenue projections? They're insane. It's gonna eclipse the launch revenue by like 20-fold, and Starlink has not IPO'd yet, so not a financial advisor, but
do you think they will though? Because
I don't know. No idea.
I don't know. Elon really
SpaceX hasn't
fucking going public with Tesla. So
yeah. I saw, totally off topic, but I did get a very rare opportunity when I was down in the Ozarks to see a string of Starlink satellites go across the night sky, and it looked insane. Like, awesome. I don't know if I'm ever going to see anything like that again in my life. Maybe I will. Maybe it'll be a more common occurrence. And I know there's some like amateur astronomers out there that are like, he's ruining the night sky with it. But personally, I thought it was a cool look and one step closer to I don't want to say Blade Runner, because Blade Runner is a dystopia, but like a cool
Sid Mead
techno king world that Elon's trying to create.
So on the where you mentioned earlier, like we're limited by physics to be able to increase the block size to 1 megabyte, because speed of light and all that, to be able to get around in 10 minutes. So there was a pretty interesting conversation going on in a Spaces the other night, and I can't remember exactly where the conversation was, but a Bitcoin dev hopped in and he basically told everybody shut the fuck up.
Was it Shinobi?
It might have been, because he was like, all that matters is, can we operate the chain because of all the transactions? And like, he just was like shutting everything else out. And I was like, I mean, I get it. Like, okay, so this is a conversation. So, all right, can everybody 50 to 60 years from now, can it be as decentralized? Can people still download the blockchain and have as much accessibility as it does now? And one thing that popped into my mind, and I'm not a developer, so I want to preface that before the idiotic shit that's about to come out of my mouth. I'm also not a shit corner, you fucks. So
I know, dude. I just give you crap on it.
So one thing that has been on my mind since he hopped on there, and it might have been Shinobi, because that's a conversation that's worth having, is I know Vitalik introduced, like, so there's Merkle trees with the way that everything works. And, you know, Jim, you know more than me. Vitalik wrote a piece, maybe Vitalik wrote a piece, and I forget what he called it. It was like Merkle trees or something, where it was basically like, instead of the Merkle tree where it's like you have the Genesis block here and then it goes down and then down and down, down, up, each one, that these, I think they were called Merkle trees, whatever the name, doesn't matter, made it to where you basically had kind of subsections of the blockchain like within each other, so you didn't have to take the entirety of the blockchain. And I kind of wonder, is
the sharding.
Yeah, sharding. Yeah. And I wonder if is that something that can exist on the Bitcoin protocol to prevent centralization like that happening? No, it can't happen.
No, okay. I don't think
it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, why is it dangerous?
Because this is the reason why Ethereum Classic is this, almost, because there was like a it's just kind of funny that the Bitcoin dev came in and had like strong convictions just the way engineers talk in general. But it's like the 51% attack, which is speculative, like speculative is the wrong term to use. It's theorized on. It pretty much happened with Ethereum, where someone assumed control. That's what Ethereum Classic is, the first tree of like the history of it. And then Ethereum then spawned from that. And now Ethereum Classic is like a test bed to see like what can and can't work, which is ideal, I guess. But it just seems like it would create lots of like for instance, on GitHub, if you start forking lots of repositories, there might be an issue. Like then a coder might push something that's broken or something, you know.
Oh, and then that particular,
and then that would be
adopts it, and then that separates from like the main chain. So
okay, that makes sense. That's my thinking on it. I would like to do a deeper dive on that to try to understand like what it would be and what wouldn't be possible. For sure, though.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not a dev, so I just like from like a fucking hot, 30,000 foot view. I'm
Same. Like, okay, I want to understand it more, like what the limitation. Like I'm thinking about like, what if we quantum entangled a node? That would be cool.
That's why. Like, that's just like too much.
But yes, on Gemini, when you started saying that, I was really hyped though, because on Gemini there is like this cool little futuristic little blurb, and I'll try to end it there. Is like expect this transaction to be 15 minutes, and just like having that foundation is cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm no dev either at all. Like, and like my technical knowledge is like very surface. But like as far as like I understand things, like this implementing something kind of like a Polkadot where they're sharding at play, like at a certain point, like you could have like certain miners like focus in on like a specific like shard or Merkle tree. And then like I don't know, it's just
it could be regional, like you run a California repository.
Yeah, I am a firm believer that Moore's law will continue to keep up with expansion especially with the dawn of like quantum computing. I know quantum computing and traditional computers are like structurally completely different things, but innovation has never failed us yet, and even as the blockchain continues in size, the cost to buy storage will continue to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So yeah, I think it's very important to keep the, I mean, I've always said this, like Bitcoin, the protocol itself, keep the base layer fucking don't fuck with it, you know, unless it's like some change that's like beneficial, such as like Taproot or something needs to be implemented. Like do all the experiments on like layer 2s, layer 3s, like they're like, you can fuck those up. It's not going to destroy like my store of wealth, you know, or my money, you know, like that's, yeah. Go ahead.
Raise my hand. That was a really quick blurb. Do you guys watch Star Trek at all?
I don't know.
Watch the new movies. I haven't watched. Like,
I have seen the new movies. I have seen
the new show Star Trek Discovery. Highly recommend it. It's really awesome. But there's like this moment where I don't want to spoil too much if anyone wants to watch it, but they travel through time, and there's like lots of varying like storylines and factions, but they have like this piece of tech like which is like their team and their ship can do these cool jumps, and they travel like spoiler alert right here, spoiler, they travel in time like 500 years, but then they still are invalid. Like there's this new like last kind of Federation outpost that's like this cool like Dyson sphere kind of camouflage thing, and they're like sending people out trying to like there's like there was this big event where like some bunch of solar flares knocked out like lots of places, but then they travel there, so they have this 500-year-old ship, and all of a sudden this 500-year-old like piece of tech is like invaluable to their mission because it can do things like it can jump like using the sites mycelium network and stuff. So I think about like Bitcoin, like Bitcoin is like this steady thing, and like just having a team of people or just something that you rely on is like it can be steady. But definitely you know, the Bitcoin devs are going to be like making big decisions in the future. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like gold. I mean, literally, like think about how long gold's been around, and it's been considered invaluable for centuries. You know, I mean, from the very moment humans were able to extract gold out of the ground, like they started using it and trading with it. It wasn't really up until the last 50 years where like gold lost its kind of foothold as like the money of the world, unfortunately. And it's kind of created this huge mess that we're currently witnessing at the beginning of the 20s, or the beginning of 2020s. So I don't know. Bitcoin, I think, is just the next it's digital gold, the digital evolution of gold. It's very good at what it does. There's nothing else that compares to it, from a narrative, from technical standpoint, from just like principles. Like you're never going to recreate that. It's just not going to happen. Like
I think much of the value determined for the Bitcoin network comes from its origin story.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And that's the part that can't be recreated. You can recreate the network, you can recreate the code, you can do all that. You can't recreate the story, and the story is what gives it its value. Well, like, there's no one in control of it.
That, and like I know it technically is not the first mover of like a digital currency, but it was literally the first one to do what it did. And at that time, there's no monetary incentive, there was no power incentive. Like all these other coins, whether they want to admit it or not, they're either motivated by power or money or both. Ultimately, you know, like, and like money's not, and when I say like power, like both those like aren't bad motivators, but they oftentimes lead to selfish decisions.
Yep.
Right when you said that, it broke 48. Just to let you know. Like almost on the dot.
I saw you smiling over there, and I was like, "Wow,
wow!"
Yeah, it really broke 48.
All right, guys, we are a little bit past an hour and a half. I know we didn't get through all those articles today, but I think this is a kind of a good stopping point here. Jim, I really appreciate you coming on.
That was fun.
Are you on Twitter?
I am. Yep.
Where can we follow you at?
At username is at Jim. You can find that.
Is seriously? Are you actually Jim? No shit.
It's at no this at sign and then the word spelled out. Username is at Jim.
Okay.
Username is at Jim.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
gotcha. I thought you actually had copped like the name Jim. Like I was like, how, dude? Like you could sell that for a lot of Bitcoin. Awesome. And then do you want to disclose where you work, or are we keeping that secret?
Yeah, I work at Strike, and it's awesome. And if there's any cohort listeners, I was going to do a discussion group with them on the 28th.
Yeah, definitely go to that. Jim's a bright dude. It's awesome meeting you. Honestly, we hadn't really interacted prior prior to that, I think there was one post, Kenny, one of the coaches, kind of.
Yeah, I was trying to let other people have their turn to speak. I didn't want to jump in and ramble on.
No, you're
Thank you so much for hopping on, man.
Yeah, no, glad you hopped on. You're welcome back anytime, especially as we're getting these things back into gear. Sean, thanks for coming on again. We're missing Moist today. It's all right. He's busy with school stuff, I'm assuming. So hopefully he'll have more time to be on. Go follow Sean at fall_of_fiat. Writings and stuff. We really haven't had a chance too much to talk about that. Sean, how's that stuff going? Where can we find kind of what you're writing lately?
I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, I'm gonna post it all up on there. I've been writing on Substack. Obviously this isn't going to be too great for the real Bitcoin maxis, but I am putting out writing pieces as NFTs if anybody's interested in that. And now the hate will fill my inbox.
I will say, like, people who really get what NFTs are, they don't hate NFTs outright. They're not built on Bitcoin yet, and they will eventually. I know they will be.
I'm going to continue saying that, like, this is my like mantra. That NFTs are a collectible derivative of an underlying asset. If you don't understand that, I cannot help you.
Yeah. Everybody values everything, right? You know?
Yeah. I mean, there are people that are pay, fucking $15,000 for a paper check that OJ used at a grocery store one time during COVID. Like, collectibles are collectibles. So if you create art, you create writing, you create something, and you can turn that into a collectible, there's value in it. That's all there is to it. I don't care about the protocol. I fuck Ethereum, fuck Polkadot, but like whatever. I don't care. I care about the fact that there is a collectible that you can tie to art.
Very cool.
Definitely. So, okay, awesome. Well, guys, appreciate you coming on. As always, if you made it this far in the podcast, please like, subscribe, tell your friends about it. Any people that are like on the path towards becoming a Bitcoin maxi, you're welcome to come on. Also share with whoever might benefit from listening to something like this. I know we're a bunch of idiots up here, but we just like talking about Bitcoin. If you're curious about when you want to be on the Sunday Scaries podcast, I've decided that I'm no longer going to be posting the Zoom link on my Twitter because there's a lot of bots that like to come in off of that link, and it gets very annoying. And I feel like sometimes, like, some of you are genuine people that are coming on and I'm not letting you in. So don't take offense to it. If you really want to be on, shoot me a DM, and on my Twitter, you can find me at Alan Hoddle. Shoot me a DM. I can send you the Zoom link. We have a email blast that goes out every weekend. It's a calendar invite with the Zoom link. I think that'll be a better way to weed out bots. Sean, we're still working on a date and time for Scaries. I know today we did it on Saturday at 3:30 Eastern. Do you want to keep doing it at 3:30 Eastern or
no?
No,
That is just that is in the midst of people doing their shit. Like, they're almost ready to go back home and start dinner.
For sure.
So I don't know. Sure. I'm more for like I want to make it to where people on the West Coast, like, they feel that it's accessible. But and that's why I think like 12 is a decent time, because it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. That's not being completely outrageous. But I don't know. Like, honestly, if anybody listening, Jim, like, anybody that's interested in being on here, just communicate to us what's a good time for you and kind of where you're at. Because the only way that we're going to be able to do this correctly is by trial and error, and we're going to be wrong a lot more than we're going to be right. So
like, we've been wrong a lot trying to figure out what time. I mean, we got people all over the place. Pacific Seaboard, Eastern Seaboard, people in Australia. So
yeah, like we're trying, guys. Like, if 3 o'clock in the morning is when we got to do it, then 3 o'clock in the morning is when we got to do it. Y'all got to communicate.
Right. Let us DM me, go follow the COB podcast Twitter at COB podcast. That's where you're going to get all the info first and foremost. And that's where you can find all of us co-hosts, along with any updates to Scaries or interviews that are going out. I am excited to say that we have a very interesting interview, I think, coming out, I hope, on Tuesday. It was supposed to come out on Thursday. but is with the head of investment relations of Hut 8 Mining. It was a fantastic conversation. So that hopefully will be out Tuesday, as long as it's approved, latest Thursday. So don't castrate on that. Don't castrate me on that. We also have a number of other things in the vault, a number of conversations with cohort members that are very valuable in terms of like getting a job in the career space. So be on the lookout for those. The best way to know when those come out is to hit that notification bell. So please do that. As always, we appreciate you guys coming on and hope you guys all have a good weekend.
Thanks for coming on. Good to see you, Jim.
Oh.